Hello, you fabulous people. It is tea time with Tia. How are you today? I hope you are having a great day. Well, I am doing a podcast today on chapters 1 through 4 from the book of Exodus, but I'm only going to cover certain details that are relevant to our time. Starting off in the book of Exodus, chapter 1, we see that there's Pharaoh who was threatened by the Israelites. The Pharaoh in this dispensation was not like the Pharaoh that preceded him. The Pharaoh that preceded him was a friend to Joseph and an ally to the Israelites, and they had favor with that one. However, as this one comes on the scene, he is not aware, or supposedly not aware, of the favor that the Israelites had at the time of Joseph on the scene. So, with that being said, as he continued on, he saw that the Israelites were growing and he was threatened by that. He was very concerned that they would eventually take over. So he decided to ask for the midwives to pretty much destroy the babies of the Israelites. Now, some of the midwives were determined not to disobey God over man. So they were so fearful of the Lord and they loved the Lord with all their heart, they refused to listen to Pharaoh's instructions and they allowed the Israelite children to live. With that being said, God blessed the midwives. He really compensated them for their obedience to Him. Within that situation, you have a seed that comes by the name of Moses. Moses' mother refused to give in to Pharaoh's commands, and she decided that she was not going to put her son to death. Instead, she placed him by faith on the Nile River and allowed him to just drift away. And his sister Miriam was there at the scene, and he had a brother named Aaron. Now, you can imagine the mother, the brother, and the sister watching their family member drift away, not knowing if they would ever see him again. But the Lord had a plan. Within this faith move by Moses' mother, she saw that eventually, as he drifted down the Nile River, he came across a well-known, respected, rich young lady who happened to be Pharaoh's daughter. When she saw Moses, the Lord gave him favor and she took him in as her own. And it just so happened that Moses' sister Miriam was on the scene and asked Pharaoh's daughter if she wanted her to find a midwife, which just happened to be Moses' mother. So Moses was reconnected to his family. There is a lesson we can learn from this. Anything you give up for the Lord, you definitely will receive it in return. And the Lord will never ask anything of you that He does not intend to give you better than what you already had. Now, as Moses was getting weaned off from his mother, there was understanding that he had to go back to Pharaoh's house. So he did that. Now, the interesting thing I want to point out here is Moses was able to live in the palace as Pharaoh's grandson. He had all the fine things that the Egyptians had, but his family lived in hostility. And then he had relatives who were enslaved and being beaten under Pharaoh's rule. So about 40 years of this, and then one day Moses saw the injustice and he could not take it, and he handled it himself, which resulted in him having to leave his family, and he was gone for a very long time. But let me just go back for a moment. I just want you to imagine what the conditions must have been like for Miriam and Aaron to think of their brother having all this fine food and attention going on in Pharaoh's kingdom, and they were still living in Goshen in a very hostile situation. 40 years of this. You wonder if there was any contention at all between them and Moses. The Bible doesn't give us this information specifically, but if you bring it to our time, real time, it's possible that those emotions could have been stirred up, unless Moses' mother was able to explain to the children that God had a plan, and just to be encouraged that it wouldn't always be that way. Well, let's say she did. It's very possible, because she knew her son was special when she put him on that water. And sure enough, 40 years later, from the time he left the land of Egypt, Moses got a direct commandment from the Lord to go back to his people and be the leader to bring them out. But it wasn't that simple. Moses was very concerned because he wasn't articulate. And the conversation carried on from chapter 3 to chapter 4, where Moses was constantly battling with the Lord that he was incompetent to take on such a task. Now, it could have very well been that if Moses had listened to the Lord, he could have given Moses a clear articulation of speech to do away with Moses' concern. We don't know that. But what we do know, it doesn't matter how incompetent we feel that we are. Whenever the Lord asks us to do anything, he gives us the ability to get it done, even within our inability to make it happen. That's how God gets the glory out of our lives. But we must make ourselves available so that he can. We must make sure we're open to him and willingly accept his plan, because he knows the outcome, and his outcome for us is greater than what we can imagine if we just continue his path. Now, I found it interesting how Moses told God he didn't feel competent to speak to Pharaoh, and then on top of that, eventually he even asked Aaron in the conversation to speak to the children of Israel for him as well. Now, it makes sense to me why he would do that, considering he was gone for 40 years from his hometown. So the children of Israel may not have been so welcoming if Moses had come back and tried to be the one to pretty much be the spokesperson too, and the leader. But because the Lord told him to, that was not something Moses should have been concerned about. But however, we sometimes in our day, we can truly relate to that, because if we've gone away from a family for a while and try to come back and put things in order and say, listen, this is the way it's going to be. The Lord told me to take over and lead. I'm sure that there will be some resistance. And some of you all may be in those situations where you were considered the black sheep in your family for a long time, and then the Lord has raised you up to be one that is different from the rest, and you are the one that actually has the lead spiritually. But you may not be as accepting, because your family members may feel like, because they know you so well or are so familiar with you, they may have a hard time receiving anything you say when it relates to the kingdom of the Lord. Don't let that discourage you. If the Lord has assigned you to reach out to your family and take that stand for him, that is something you must do if you're going to follow him. And another interesting thing, Moses finally obeyed the Lord, and the Lord, but not before making an agreement or the Lord making a compensation for Moses by way of his brother. So God compensated Moses' desire by just telling him to let Aaron be the spokesperson for him. And so Moses is obedient, and he and Aaron reconnects, and it's a beautiful reunion. And so you can imagine this time they're in their 80s. Remember, Aaron and Miriam are older than Moses. Their mother most likely have passed by this time. So he goes back, and his family has been living in those conditions for over 80 years. And Moses was able to escape all of that. He was first in a very nice home, or like living in a White House for over 40 years, roughly 40 years, and then being able to escape the threat that was upon him from from Pharaoh's officers, and having to go to Midian where there was peace and quiet. That's interesting right there. While his family was still living in those conditions that he knew wasn't fair. So Pharaoh really did have it out for Moses, but God did cover him. And although it looks challenging, because for the family anyway, who was living in hostility, God had a plan in place that may not be well taken by the Israelites. So as you can see, reading further along, if you have, they were not accepting of Moses all the time. And the Lord knew that there would be some resistance, but his plan still prevailed. In your personal life, you know who you are. And like with Moses, he felt incompetent. But his incompetence did not stop him from being able to do what God had called him to do. It did not change God's mind. So I want you to know that regardless of how you feel about yourself, whatever God has for you and told you to do, he's not going to change his mind. Now I want you to look in your hands. Just look at your hands for a moment and say to your hands, what can you do? And I want you to listen clearly. And I want you to imagine that your hands are talking back to you. And if your hands could talk, this is what they would say. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And this is the message I want to leave with you today. Just as Moses was called, set aside for God's purpose, for sure, you too have been called for God's purpose. Whether you are fulfilling that purpose, that is another story. But if you know you're called for God's purpose, it's so important for you to stop, look at yourself in the mirror, and ask yourself, what can you do? And then tell yourself, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And until the next time you sit with me, God bless you. Enjoy your tea.